Federation of Teachers, Senate District 27, Public Education Town Hall. We are very thankful to our local library for hosting us tonight. And we are in person here in the Valley to discuss public education and our local neighborhood schools. We're also streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. My name is Mary Catherine Nieto. I am an educator. I have been for 28 years, and I'm also a co-chairperson for Best AFT. And this evening, we're very proud to host, sorry about that, our two candidates for Senate District 27, Morgan Lamantia and Sarah Stapleton Barrera. Throughout the evening, we will be having a conversation about the issues affecting public schools each day. We'll discuss how each candidate plans to help improve our community schools, support our school employees, and better the educational experiences of the students throughout the state. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for introduction and 3 minutes to answer each question. Both candidates are supposed to answer the question asked and not to answer a previous question or the other candidate's response.
I would like to introduce our special guest here with us tonight, Giovanni Escobedo of Raise Your Hands, Texas, Salome Acevedo, President of Barcy Retired Teachers, BISD Superintendent Dr. Gutierrez, Board Member Dr. Tipton, Board Member Drew Brown, Board Member Jessica Gonzalez, and Board Member Daniela Lopez Valdez.
We would also like to welcome another special guest, our newly elected representative for District 38, Ms. Erin Gomez. Let's give Ms. Gomez, a Best AFT endorsed representative, our full attention while she says a few words.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Erin Elizabeth Gomez, and I want to thank you so much for all of your help and assistance in helping us achieve this amazing goal of being our first female state representative of District 38. Thank you. Thank you, Bess. Thank you, AFT. Thank you, Brownsville and Cameron County Public School advocates. I know that if it wasn't for your fierce commitment and dedication to education outside of the classroom, which is what you're doing here today, that I wouldn't have the blessing to be standing here before you. I'm so grateful for everything you do after the hours of 5. You are still fiercely committed to our community. It's so important that you know that what you do has tremendous impact. In a community like ours, where we have sometimes less than 10% of our community to turn out to vote, the ability that you give candidates to stand before you here today is not just educating individuals on the vicious problems that we're having running our public school system, but you're allowing the community to become educated on the future leaders of this great state of Texas. So thank you for everything that you do. We would not be able to do it without you. And please tell everyone about what's happening here tonight. Let everyone know how important this election is for the future of our beautiful city, of our great county, and of our state. Because without you, we definitely can't do this. And just know that no matter where we go from here on out, we will always be fiercely committed to this district, to our public school system, and to our teachers. Because I know that if it wasn't for you, none of us would be standing before you here today. So thank you so much. And again, my sincerest appreciation for all your help and support. God bless.
Welcome candidates Morgan Lamantia and Sarah Stapleton Barrera. Would you both be willing to introduce yourselves? If so, you have 2 minutes each. Morgan, you may go first, followed by Sarah.
Hi, I'm Morgan Lamantia, and I'm running for State Senate for District 27. First, I want to say thank you so much for having us here. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all, but most importantly, thank you for everything everyone here does as educators and part of our public education system. We know that you guys work hard day and night throughout all hours, not just school hours, but after hours as well. and that you guys went above and beyond during the pandemic. And without all of your efforts, we wouldn't be where we are today. So thank you. Thank each and every one of you. But I'm running for state senate because I love this community, but we all know that it has some problems. We need to make job creation a priority. We need to help our healthcare system, make sure it's accessible and affordable to everyone out there in our communities, all of our loved ones. But we also need to fully fund our public education. We need to pay our teachers what they're worth and what they're valued. We need to take care of our teachers in retirement. When we talk about education and healthcare and jobs, what we're really talking about here are our families. And so what we need is we need to go up to Austin. We need to fight for what we deserve here in South Texas so that we can continue to support and grow our strong South Texas families. You know, my story is a typical South Texas story. My grandfather came down here at 17 to work on our family farms without being able to finish high school. But he believed in education and he understood how important education was. So as he built his business, he continued to give back to the community. And 20 years ago, he started a scholarship program. And with that scholarship program, we've been able to put college within reach for over 17,000 students in this community. And I want to continue that legacy. And we know that not everyone is destined for a 4-year or even 2-year degree. So we need to make sure we bring back those innovation skills, those job creation skills into our K-12 grades and make sure we have that job training. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone, for having me here today. My name is Sarah Stapleton Barrera, and I am running for state senate. And I'm extremely proud to be here with this group of people. Just as a show of hands, how many people here are educators? All right. So you, with your hands up, are the authority on this issue. You are the ones that we turn to when we have questions. You are the ones who have your boots on the ground, day in and day out, and who should be writing legislation with your next senator. I am born and raised here in Brownsville. I'm an attorney, been practicing here for about 12 years, and I'm a mom of 3 little kids. I've got a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And my vision for these 3 little kiddos is to have their life and their education here in Brownsville, Texas, better than mine was when I was growing up. And if we all in this room can work together, the sky is the limit for us here in Brownsville. We can be the leaders, not the followers, not just the trailers, but we can be the trailblazers and the leaders when it comes to public education. And we can show the rest of the state, you know what? Here we are, Brownsville, Texas is on the map, and we'll show you the way. So I appreciate having you guys here tonight, and I look forward to getting to know everyone better in this room throughout the next weeks, days, months, years, whatever it takes. And I appreciate having you guys having me here. Thank you.
Morgan, you may go.
So I've been asked this question a lot throughout this campaign process, and the answer hasn't changed. The reason why I decided to run was because of the responsibility that my parents and my grandfather taught us. That we have a responsibility to give back to the community whenever we have a chance, whenever we are able. And that's what makes us good members of this community. So I'm an attorney and a businesswoman, and I came down to the Valley after having the opportunity to go anywhere in the country, but I wanted to come back to the Valley where my family is from to help this community work here. And I ended up being in-house counsel for my family's business. And while there, we rewrote our health plan because we saw how difficult it was for our employees to battle these surprise bills and these huge expenses and the difficulties in getting access to care. So we wanted to make sure they had a way to get affordable, accessible care access and get in front of those doctors. and make sure that they could manage the chronic diseases, make sure that they and their families were healthier. We were able to do that by finding innovative ways and putting them in place for our employees and our families. And with those innovative ideas, we were able to save our plan money and pass the savings on to our employees by lowering their premiums. But through that experience, I saw how broken our healthcare system was and how we were able to do something because we were able to remove ourselves from that system. But that's not true for a lot of us. That's not true for the small businesses in this community. That's not true for individuals that don't have that employer-based health insurance. And that's something we need to do and we need to fix at the legislative level. However we can to make sure everyone, all of our loved ones have accessible access to healthcare and it's affordable because we need to expand Medicaid. We are leaving billions of federal dollars on the table by not taking that step. And that's something we can do. And once we do, that'll free up even more money for us to focus on our public education. Because though it took the pandemic to highlight it, it highlighted a problem we've been facing for a long time, and that's our teachers and our public education system and our educators. And we are seeing that we are not paying our educators what they deserve, and we need those state funds. We have to fight for those state funds to raise that pay. We need those state funds to make sure our public schools are fully funded because they haven't been fully funded probably ever, if not in a very long time. And because of that, our teachers are taking what little money they have when they come home and using that extra money to pay for supplies for their students because they want to make sure all of you are always fighting to make sure that your students have the best that they need. And it shouldn't be on you to do that. That should be on the state. And we need to step up as a state legislature and take care of our teachers and our educators because you guys really are training our future. And our future is in your hands. And we need to make sure that you understand that we support you, we care for you, we want to help you, and we respect you. Thank you.
Sarah, why did you decide to run for office and how will you be intentional about uplifting public education and advocating for teachers and support staff in Austin?
Thank you. So I never in my wildest dreams thought I would be running for office. Most certainly not state senate. It was not in my trajectory for what I thought my life was going to hold. But we never know what's going to happen in the future, right? And here we are. About 10 years ago, I found myself in a pretty tough time. I was a single mom, trying to figure out how to make daycare and healthcare and all those ends meet. Things a light bill sometimes, how to get Pampers for this 2-year-old baby. And one night, in the middle of the night, I woke up to the smell of smoke in this old house that me and my child were living in. And I hopped out of bed and there was a flaming fire between my bedroom and the baby's nursery. Anyone in here that's got a family or kids can imagine what that feeling was like. So I run to the kitchen and get a baby fire extinguisher, put the thing out, and avoided all catastrophe. But this could have been the worst day of my entire life. And from that experience, it was an eye-opener for me. It was a game changer. And I started looking around and saying, wow, I wasn't able to pull myself out of that situation because I had an education, and I had parents that were willing to help. But as I looked around, I realized, look, not everybody's in the situation that I am. People are stuck. And it really, that started my journey. I started practicing indigent law for people that can't afford an attorney. That's what I've done for the past 12 years. And what I've learned in the courtroom, day in and day out, is you can see and feel how these good laws can really help people and help families. But more importantly, how bad laws can ruin people's lives. So that's what sort of kickstarted this journey. And then I decided in 2020 to run for office. People thought I was nuts, I had a 3-month-old baby, I'd walk around with one of those little backpack things and go to the town and run on my car, and, it was a wild time, but what happened from that is a movement started in our South Texas, and people were excited. it was unheard of. We got as far as we did in that last race. And said, I've seen young women that approached by young women who said, we're going to run for office. We're going to do it. You know, we don't have to live with the status quo. And I could not be prouder of where Brownsville has come today.
Thank you. The next question is going to be posed to Sarah first and then to Morgan. Texas AFT just released a white paper along with our partners from every Texan that did groundbreaking research into teacher wages. The research found that the period of 2011 to 2021 was a lost decade of educator wages. Teachers in Texas, on average, took a 4% pay cut over this time period when accounting for inflation. You almost can't afford to be a teacher in Texas. What do you propose to do about it in office?
Yeah, so about 15 years ago, I was a teacher. I came from a family of teachers. My mom's a teacher, my sister's a teacher, so I thought that this would be a good thing for me to do. And so I was a teacher. I taught elementary music. And I learned from that experience that you have to budget. You make a very small amount of money, and you have to budget every penny of your day. And forbid you've got to go higher or something happens that throws off the budget. The teachers are in trouble. If you break it down in the state of Texas teachers are being paid roughly about $19.23 per hour, and that's 19% below the national average. That's where we are. In addition to that, Texas is spending $4,000 less per child on their education. So not only are teachers underpaid, but teachers aren't equipped with the resources in the classroom that they need to teach these kids. So what is the solution, right? The solution is the immediate teacher raise. If we could start our new teachers at $60,000 and our more senior teachers at a higher schedule, I think that's a start. Our teachers right now have literally endured a global pandemic, an economic collapse, and another storm. These are the teachers that have held our communities together through these historic processes. They had our backs. Now it's time for the state of Texas to have theirs. We've got the money. This next legislative session, we're going to have a surplus of $12 billion. So we need to ensure that we have leaders in there that know where it belongs. And as a previous teacher, I can tell you, I mean, we all know that we're overworked, underpaid, have no work after hours, have no work weekends, grading. I mean, all that stuff adds up to an enormous amount of time. So yeah, immediate teacher rate 60,000 like yesterday.
Thank you. We're going to be posing the same question to Morgan. Texas AFT just released a white paper along with our partners from every Texan that did groundbreaking research into teacher wages. The research found that the period of 2011 to 2021 was a lost decade of educator wages. Teachers in Texas, on average, took a 4% pay cut over this time period when accounting for inflation. You almost can't afford to be a teacher in Texas. What do you propose to do about it in office?
So currently, the average teacher here in Texas is being paid about $7,000 behind everyone else in this country. That is at a minimum what we need to do. We need to be able to pay our teachers at least the average rate for the rest of the country is being paid. And because we're behind, we are losing teachers. We are seeing that teacher loss across the state. And it's something we cannot afford. And we cannot afford to continue paying our teachers less than their worth. Even the average, it does not meet what the teacher is worth. A teacher's value as a professional having such a large role in our families and our kids' lives. You know, when you look at a child and how they succeeded, it doesn't track back to their scores on a STAR test or scores on any type of standard test. What that tracks back to is having that good qualified teacher that they know, and that teacher that took the time to make sure that they got the education they needed. And because of that, we need to make sure our teachers are paid at the level that we value them. You guys are professionals. We need to pay you that way. And it's not just teachers, it's all educators. And it's our support staff and our auxiliary as well. We are not paying anyone in the public education system what they deserve to be paid. What we can do at the state level is we can make sure we fully fund our public schools. We can raise the basic allotment for our students per head. We can make sure that we have funds dedicated to teacher pay to make sure that our teachers receive those funds. We want to make sure we work with our local school districts so that we make sure that we are in line and making sure that they're getting the full funding that they need, but also that there is funding dedicated to those teacher pays. Because with our gas prices going up, with our grocery store costs going up and health insurance skyrocketing, we need to make sure that all of our teachers have what they need to be able to survive, to be able to take care of their own families in addition to ours that you see and educate every day in your classrooms. It's the least we can do is pay you what you're worth, and the absolute minimum is make sure we at least match the national average. So thank you guys for everything you do, and I hope to be able to have the opportunity to go to Austin and fight for each and every one of you.
Thank you. The next question, we will start with Morgan and then go to Sarah, 3 minutes again. Retired teachers are undergoing many of the same economic struggles. It has been more than a decade since the legislature passed a cost of living adjustment for TRS beneficiaries. Will you commit to supporting a COLA, cost of living allowance, and what will you do to get it done for retired teachers?
Yes, the fact that retired teachers haven't had a COLA, cost of living adjustment in over 20 years is ridiculous. I mean, you have Social Security. Social Security has an adjustment almost every year. We have so many other retirement programs all get adjusted, and yet teachers have been left behind. And as retired teachers have been left behind. And as we said earlier, you know, just from 2011, there's been a 4% pay cut because of inflation. Imagine that compounded over 20 years. It is a wonder our retired teachers are able to survive on what they're currently being paid. And the health insurance premiums that they're being asked to pay in addition to that, they're having to coupon and pinch pennies, and a 13th check isn't going to cut it. And the fact that the legislature agrees to give out those 13 checks every year or every other year just shows that they understand that there's a problem and they recognize that there's an issue. But that is a minimum step. What we need to do is adjust that formula from the base level. We need to make sure that there is a regular adjustment for cost of living, not just one whenever it becomes that every 20 years and people get fed up. It needs to be built into the formula. It needs to be built into the system, and we need to start accounting for it because our teachers need to be able to sustain and they need to be able to have a living wage when they retire. Because I've spoken to some retired teachers and I've spoken to teachers now, and they all understand that when they go into teaching, they're willing to accept that they're not going to get paid what they're worth because there's a promise that we will take care of them in retirement. And that is not the case now, and it has not been the case for a very long time. And Texas needs to step up and honor that promise to our teachers, especially when we're paying them $7,000 below the national average. We need to take care of them in retirement. We need to take care of them while they're teaching our students. And we have fallen behind and we have failed our promise, and we need to start making that correct.
Retired teachers are undergoing many of the same economic struggles. It has been more than a decade since the legislature passed a cost of living adjustment, COLA, for TRS beneficiaries. Will you commit to supporting a COLA, cost of living adjustment, and what will you do to get it done for retired teachers?
Yeah, so let's talk about that last legislative session, right? It was back in 2013. And the ledge says, all right, we will give you a cost of living adjustment, but here's the catch. just for you teachers that retired before 2004. So at this point in time, we're in 2013, saying, yeah, we can adjust it, but not this gap of people, just everyone before this period of time. That's what they gave us. That's what we're looking at. So what happens to all of our teachers that have retired in the past 18 years? What happened since 2004? And let's look at the world around us, right? Let's look how the world has changed since 2004. First of all, gas, right? Back in 2004, we could go down to the gas station and put a gallon of gas in our tank for $1.50. Has anybody checked the prices this morning? Where are we at? Does anybody know off the top of their head? I mean, the numbers are insanity. Let's look at eggs. In 2004, you could get a dozen of eggs for $1.34. Now you go to HEB and they'll start at $2.01, but those may not be the kind of eggs you want to buy. If you're looking at the good stuff, you're looking, north of $4 or $5. Let's hit the junk food, right? Big Macs. Big Macs back in 2004 were $2.90. If you want a Big Mac now, $3.99. I mean, these are silly examples, but this is what we're dealing with, and this is just, everyday examples, but you look at the extremes and that stuff adds up. So how in the world are retired teachers supposed to make it? This last legislative session, HB 3214, that would have given teachers at least a 6% increase, and it died on the floor. When a bill like that dies on the floor, what is that telling us? Yeah, I mean, it's disheartening knowing that we get close and then we're tossed aside time and time again. So what do we need? We need to push for an emergency action regarding COLA. That's what they need to do, and that's what they need to do right now. If there's any time in this world that's an emergency, at least in my lifetime, it would be right now. And we have experienced stuff in our lifetimes that I don't think any of us could have ever imagined we would experience. Between 4 nights out with no heat during a freeze to masks and homeschooling. If there is any time to address this and to pass for emergency money and funding for retired teachers, it's today.
Sarah, as a follow-up, will you commit to protecting and supporting TRS as a defined benefit plan?
Yeah, I mean, all right, let's use our imaginations for a minute, right? Let's daydream about retirement. Let's daydream about what our perfect retirement looks like, right? Do we see beach and waves, or I don't know, maybe we see mountains and snow? What does our perfect retirement smell like? Do we smell margaritas? I mean, what does it sound like? Do we hear string instruments every day? I mean, this is what teachers should be dreaming about in their retirement, but that is far, far from the reality. I mean, what the reality is retired teachers are not able to retire. They're driving Ubers. They're hitting up the food banks. They are, having to pick up these second careers and pinch pennies just to make it down to the bingo hall. I mean, that's the reality of what retired teachers are having to deal with today. It's like me telling everybody in this room, hey, we're on an airplane together, right? And we may or may not have wheels on this landing. How do teachers feel about going into retirement knowing that it may not be funded? They may not be funded. They may not have a retirement once they get there. I mean, those are the fears that our retired teachers are going into. Just almost asking for a crash landing. That's no way to teach our teachers, to these people that have dedicated their entire lives for our children. And we say, good luck. I mean, that's what it's been, folks. And it is time that changes. We've got to modernize the TRS system, increase the TRS multiplier, Like I said, this next section is going to have $12 billion to spend. So you better believe when we have our legislators up there, and Ms. Gomez will be one of them, fighting for that funding to go directly to education, because where else can we spend it at this point, right? So yes, I will absolutely be a champion for the TRS.
Morgan, as a follow-up, will you commit supporting the GRS as a defined benefit plan?
Yeah, so the defined benefit plan, what we're talking about here is what many of us refer to and know as a pension plan. What that means is that you have a guaranteed payment when you retire. And that is a guaranteed payment based on a set and decided formula. So when our teachers, our educators retire, they know what that retirement benefit is going to be. Because the responsibility and the risk for paying out that amount, that allotted amount, is on the employer. It is on the employer, it's on the state. What has been at risk a lot during session and recently is changing that defined benefit retirement plan into what's called a defined contribution, which is more like a 401k. Many of us are familiar with as well. What that means is that risk now switches over and is now on the employee. If something happens with the marketplace, if something happens with Wall Street again, you do not have a guaranteed retirement plan. You are now at risk and could have not enough money in your bank to last you your entire retirement period. And with teachers not having the fallback of Social Security on top of that, we put you at huge risk during your retirement by making that switch. And so that's something we need to fight to protect, because the TRS defined benefit plan, though it has its problems and is not paying out sufficient amounts to really cover your retirement, as we discussed earlier, it can work. And we've seen it work when it's fully funded and when we have those higher matching funds and when we have formulas in place to adjust for that cost of living adjustment. But we need to make sure it's funded. We need to make sure it's protected. This is one of the largest defined benefit plans in the country, one of the top 5, and it's managed by some of the smartest people out there in regards to finances, and they want to make sure it's protected. So taking it away would be a mistake for our educators and our teachers. It would be a mistake for our school districts, because that's going to have a lot of costs there. It'll be a mistake for the state, because we are not having to feed into that Social Security cost for our teachers because we have this other benefit. But we need to protect it, we need to fund it, we need to make sure the state matches it at a higher level so that it is able to pay out to each and every one of our retired teachers at the levels that they can use to pay their bills and take care of their families during retirement.
Thank you. Our next question will be posed to Morgan first and then Sarah. Educators in this state feel a profound sense of disrespect. We do not feel valued by the powers that be. Educators are leaving the profession, and we are on the cusp of a retention crisis in Texas. We don't feel included. If elected, how will you ensure experienced, highly qualified educators and school employees are respected and included in debates, decisions, and policies adopted by the legislature?
So pay is a part of that respect, but it is not the full story. We are demanding more and more from our educators and our teachers, and we are giving them less in exchange for that work. Every time the legislature passes a new requirement for our educators and our school districts to meet, they don't go back and review the ones that are already in place and make sure we're eliminating ones that do no longer apply. We are just adding more and more work on top of it. What that ends up creating is duplicate paperwork. We end up forcing programs that don't work or seem unimportant and have no real value. So we need to reevaluate all the work we're loading up on our teachers. And in addition, with HB 4545, which addressed the learning loss that happened during COVID, that was so much more work than was already going on. And that bill was originally written to help with Houston ISD learning loss, and they just expanded it statewide. It is not a perfect fit. But the other side of that is because our school districts are losing support staff and we don't have that paraprofessional and the auxiliary staff to help support and meet these requirements for our teachers, we are asking more for our teachers to pick up more of that slack. And that's something we can't do. We can't keep putting on the extra work on our educators alone. We need to make sure that we can have that support staff there. But as we overwork them and underpay them and they drop off of the system, it gets loaded up onto our teachers and to the administration that we do have. And so we need to start making changes from the top down in order to get those solutions fixed, those problems fixed, excuse me. But what we also need to do is we need to take politics out of the classroom. We need to stop attacking our teachers and telling them that they're not doing a good job and trying to micromanage them in the classroom. Because as we said, it is the teacher that helps the child succeed. And we need our teachers to be able to do what their passion is, and that's teach. That is teach our kids critical thinking. That is to teach our kids to think for themselves, to find and look for the resources they need in order to find the answers that they're looking for and be able to grow as an individual, as a human, as a member of this community. And then require them to teach the tests, require them to teach the numbers, minimizing their work to a data figure and statistic. That is what is piling on onto that issue of respect, onto teachers feeling no love for our community, on teachers feeling like they're being hated and they're being targeted by everyone around them. And that's just one small thing we can start to do, is taking the politics out, letting our teachers teach, and of course paying them what they deserve.
Thank you. Sarah, we're going to ask you the same question. Educators in this state feel a profound sense of disrespect. We do not feel valued by the powers that be. Educators are leaving the profession, and we are on the cusp of a retention crisis in Texas. We don't feel included. If elected, how will you ensure experienced, highly qualified educators and school employees are respected and included in debate, decisions, and policies adopted by the legislature?
Yeah, I mean, just listening to that question, it's funny because, teachers aren't respected by the powers that be, right? That's the problem, is these powers that be. Some teachers don't know who to talk to or who to complain to. There's this huge disconnect, right, between the people that are writing the rules and the people that are having to live underneath them. And that type of leadership does not work with these powers to be. The only way in the world to write legislation that works is not by a senator sitting down and writing a piece of legislation for this group. The only way that it works and the only way that we get it right is if we sit down, we have pen to paper, and we start crafting ideas together, and we start brainstorming, and we start putting it together. Because you guys are the ones that are in that classroom day in and day out. You guys know all the nuances that make your lives easier or worse. Not a legislator sitting in a big desk at Austin. So how do we fix that, right? How do we ensure that we have this circular sort of leadership? Well, we do things like this. We sit at big tables, we have town halls, we utilize technology, we do polling, but we make sure that when our senator is going out there to vote on legislation or to write legislation, that we have the local community backing that piece of legislation. If the majority of the people in here are saying, hey, that's not right, it's not going to work out, then we don't do it. I mean, we've got to have leadership where people, what is a senator? A senator is really the mouthpiece. And a senator is the person that goes in and does what you want us to do and listens to you and passes on that message. But there's no way it can be done without you. I mean, I give this example. I was at a meeting with a group of fishermen not too long ago, and I do not know a thing about fishing. I mean, to be quite frank, I don't, but they do. And so they had all these different ideas of what needs to happen with legislation regarding fishing. And that's how we get it right. Otherwise we're going to get it wrong. Professional collaboration, shared decision-making, That's the way that we will ensure that our voices are heard, and we haven't had that. I mean, till the day we have these powers to be that are guiding all of your decisions, we will not progress. So we've got to reimagine how this works, put the old way of doing things out the door, and just get down to business with our pen and paper in hand.
Okay, we're going to start with Sarah and then to Morgan. Sarah, school districts and the legislature are putting more and more work on educators and asking for more each day. House Bill 4545 added at least 60 hours of unpaid work on the educators through mandatory reading academies. How can we make sure that an educator's workday and work-life balance is respected, while at the same time making sure that we are fairly compensated for our work?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I've been hearing about the 60-hour edition that these teachers are having, but it's not really 60 hours, right? I mean, these teachers are getting in there and it's taking far further than 60 hours. And so this is a big part of our teacher mass exodus, right? Teachers are leaving because this 60-hour course, they're having to squeeze it in. They're not finishing it. They have a deadline by 2023 where they have to get it all in. And they're saying, we want something else. And I'm concerned. I mean, we're putting these pressures have been placed upon teachers that are just sort of, unfathomable. I was talking to a teacher not too long ago who said, I have the next 3 weekends tied up with school-related activities that will not be paid for. And this is all too common, I think, with teachers. I mean, how many of us in here have ever worked fast food or restaurant industry? All right, some of us in here. I myself used to be a stand-up artist at the local suburb, right? And let me tell you this, is the moment I found out, do you think I was going to be one of the judges? No, you're not. And if that manager would call and say, hey, I'm going to have you work 3 more shifts for free. I mean, it's my goal. I was 18 at the time, and any person would say, you know what, you're crazy, I'm out of here. But that is just an expectation that is placed upon the teachers, and they can't say no. I mean, even saying that sounds ridiculous, but that is the reality of what it's like. So let's break down the hours, right? Let's do a little math. Teachers get paid for 187 work days, more or less. 7 hour days, more or less. It's supposed to be around 13,000 hours a year. Now, let's do the average, right? We're at 450 average hours for classroom planning, 300 hours for grading. Let's add 140 hours of planning outside the classroom. Let's add 100 hours of professional development and training. Now let's add 40 hours of email communication. Where does that leave us? That leaves us at over 2,339 hours per year, over 43 hours a work week, working year round. That's what our teachers are having to deal with. What's the solution? We pay teachers for their time. Not one more sandwich will be made after you clock out.
Thank you. Morgan, same question. School districts and the legislature are putting more and more onto educators and asking for more each day. House Bill 4545 added at least 60 hours of unpaid work onto the educators through mandatory reading academies. How can we make sure that an educator's workday and work-life balance is respected, while at the same time making sure we are fairly compensated for our work?
So we've touched on the fact that teachers are not very compensated today for their work, and they haven't been very compensated for a long time. And now we're adding on more work on top of that, and we're asking them to spend more time doing more data, more paperwork, and spending more time in different lessons and outside this classroom training themselves. But what we're also not talking about, and what is a big effect of all this extra work, is the effect it has on our mental health, on the mental health of our educators and our teachers. This is a lot of uncompensated work that they're doing in addition to what they do every day with our students, with our kids, but they're doing it at the same time being targeted and being just not respected by our community and our state levels and by our media. And that is affecting our mental health of our educators. And that's another cause of what's happening with the burnout and why our teachers are leaving in droves, why we can't find substitutes and we can't get that auxiliary help. We cannot find, our teachers are having to pick up so much more work because of this burnout that's happening. And the teachers that are saying they have a passion for it, we should be rewarding them and encouraging that passion. But with this extra work, with this lack of respect, and with this lack of pay, that's the exact opposite of what we're doing. So we need to make sure that if there are more rules or more requirements that we need to put on teachers to make sure we bridge this learning gap, if it's truly in the best interest of our students, then we need to make sure we are paying our teachers for that extra work. We need to make sure that we're reevaluating the entire workload so that we understand that teachers have that work-life balance, so that teachers have the ability to take care of themselves, take care of their families, take care of their mental health. So that way they can come into the classroom, they have the confidence to know that their financials, their family's financial situation is okay. They have the ability to know that they can come in well rested and ready for the next day. And they have the ability to know that they are being taken care of and they're being respected and treated well. But adding on more work without reevaluating the entire system is not the way to go. And we need to make sure that all teachers have the workload that they can handle. And if they can't, we have that support staff to help them with it. And we pay that support staff with their work, and we make sure we're not overworking them either, because we need to take care of everyone in that public education system, because it truly is a team. And when we have one spoke broken of that wheel, it depends on everyone else to pick up that slack. And we need to make sure we have everyone working together.
Morgan, charter schools in Texas account for $3.6 billion in public education funding, but aren't accountable to locally elected school boards or the voters. This lack of accountability has led to serious abuses, with charter school operators paying for skybox tickets, private planes, and advertising with taxpayer dollars. What will you do to oversee the charter school system in Texas and protect the taxpayers from these abuses?
So the charter programs here throughout the state of Texas, they have a lot of benefits that our public education doesn't. We need to equalize those systems. The charter schools get a basic allotment amount that is at least $1,200 more than our public education. And that's because they're allowed to be treated as though they are a small school district. A small school district has about 1,600 students. The charter schools here in South Texas have more students than Fort Worth or Corpus Christi school districts, our urban school districts. And the fact that they're being treated like some of our smallest ones, it does not make sense. It doesn't work. So we are getting these tax dollars. The state is reallocating them and making sure through recapture and making sure all school districts get the same amount. However, that is not a true figure because the charter schools are getting so much more than our public education, our public schools are getting. And when they get these funds, they spend less per student than our public education does. Our public schools are getting less money than our charter schools, and they are the ones getting more per student than the charters are. Charters are using that money, like you said, for administrative fees, for office space, $12 million in advertising a year. It's not something our public dollars should be going towards. And in addition to just charter schools getting more money per student, they have so many more benefits than our public education does. They don't have a local elected school board that they have to answer to. They don't have parent involvement like our public education schools do. They also don't have requirements on their teachers. Their teachers aren't required to be certified. Their administrative staff aren't required to be certified. Their budgets aren't audited or open to the public to review. They are allowed to do so much more with those funds, and they are taking advantage of our public education system. What we need to do is we need to equalize the playing field. What's good for one student receiving public funds should be good for all students. So certified teachers are good for all of our students, and it's something we need to back up and require. That should be the same for our charter programs. We need to make sure that the basic allotment is equalized across all programs out there. And we need to make sure that our number one priority is our public education, and our public schools are fully funded, and our teachers are paid what they are before there's any more proliferation of more charter schools in our areas. Because they're allowed to grow without any other vote or benefit or ask from the community. Community has no say in a new charter popping up in an area. They don't have to go to bonds, have bond elections. There's so many requirements there, and it affects our public schools, because each time our public schools lose a student, that's more money that they just lost, and that's less money per student that's being allotted, and that's less money for our teachers. So it's something we desperately need to change.
Sarah, same question. Charter schools in Texas account for $3.6 billion in public education funding, but aren't accountable to locally elected school boards or the voters. This lack of accountability has led to serious abuses, with charter schools operators paying for skybox tickets, private planes, and advertising with taxpayer dollars. What will you do to oversee the charter school system in Texas and protect the taxpayers from these abuses?
Yeah, I've got to make a confession to y'all here tonight. I had never in my life stepped foot into a charter school. I've been in and out of a million public schools. I'm a product of public school myself, and I've been in the local diocese schools and the Montessori schools, but I physically had never stepped foot into a charter school. So I did it. I went not too long ago, and you walk into this building, and it's beautiful. I mean, it was shockingly beautiful and clean and nice and fresh and new. The facade was amazingly awesome, right? But upon leaving, I had a sort of an unsettled feeling. I couldn't figure out what it was. And, it dawned on me why I had this feeling. And the reason is because all of our kids deserve to be in a beautiful building like that. And they're not. And they're not. Just the chosen few that are allowed into these charter schools based on these applications where they can not allow somebody to come based on all sorts of criteria. That was the unsettling feeling. And on top of it, we've talked about the Jets and we've talked about the Spurs, but what else we know is that back a couple of years ago, $24 million of federal funds were allocated to 232 Texas charter schools. And of those 232 schools, 72 of those schools had never opened or were already closed. I mean, shocking. And then we hear later about these audits that are happening, and 22 out of 33 schools, Texas charter schools, were in violation of federal conflict of interest rules. And that's what we've got. And we've got these big, beautiful buildings, but they can't fill them because once October hits, and once the state has taken their numbers, and they always take the numbers so they know how much funding each school gets. Once those numbers are taken after October, then the charter school starts setting those students free. And, well, it's not going to work out here. You need to go back to BISD. And those funds aren't going with them. So it was clear as day after leaving that beautiful building that's where our problems lie.
Thank you. This next question will be a follow-up question to Lazaros, and it will be first asked of Sarah and then of Morgan. We know that unaccountable charter schools in Texas account for billions in funding. Wouldn't this funding be more appropriately used bolstering our neighborhood public schools? Doesn't it make sense to reallocate these dollars from for-profit charter chains to school districts to support teacher retention and school employee wages.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's certainly the case, right? What we have with charter schools is we have a school that is funded by the public. I mean, our tax dollars are coming out of our pocket, we want to fund the school, but it's privately maintained, right? So that all these tax dollars that we're putting into charter schools are not staying here. Those tax dollars are going to the big CEOs in New York City or California or Florida, wherever these powers that may be are situated, right? So yeah, I mean, when you look at the numbers of Texas and how we are on education and where we fall amongst the rest of the nation, I mean, Texas is way behind, and it's hard to say that because this is our home, and we want to be the best. And we can be. But we're not. We're just not. But that's where this reimagination of education comes into play. We can't go into the ledge and, try to just make these minor sort of little tweaks and changes here and there. It is a complete overhaul. I mean, we hear teachers every day talking about this A through F system and the accountability and how it doesn't work and having to teach to the test. I mean, when we talk about putting charters on an equal playing field regarding accountability, do we really want the equal playing field to be our teachers having to teach to this test? And our teachers statewide having to deal with this A through F program? I don't think that that's the answer. I think the answer is a complete overhaul. I mean, if you talk to teachers around the state, if you can find me a handful of teachers that say, hey, this is working out just great, y'all. This is perfect, and I think that we're doing a good job. Then bring them, because I'd love to hear that perspective. But I've been talking to teachers for a long time now, and that is certainly not the story that we're hearing. So what do you do when something is broke? You fix it.
Thank you. Morgan, as a follow-up to Elizabeth's previous question, we know that unaccountable charter schools in Texas account for billions in funding. Wouldn't this funding be more appropriately used bolstering our neighborhood public schools? Doesn't it make sense to reallocate these dollars from for-profit charter chains to school districts to support teacher retention and school employee wages?
So I think our priority has to change, and it needs to be on public education. And we need to make sure that we fully fund our public education, that we pay our teachers, our educators, our auxiliary staff, and our support staff what they need to be paid before we start allowing more charter schools to be built and more schools to pop up. As our school districts, our local school districts are struggling, and as just locally, we have BISD who's starting to have to be forced to unite their schools, to consolidate schools together, because they need to make sure that they're able to keep the lights on and keep their teachers paid. Next door, you have a new idea popping up, a new charter popping up. And so why are we forcing consolidation in our public school system while letting the charters grow? That's not a good use of our public funds. It's not a good use of our tax dollars. We are using our tax dollars to pay for 2 different buildings, 2 different campuses, 2 different administration staffs. That is not what this area, what this community needs. The other truth that we need to accept is that charter schools are here, and trying to get rid of all of them right away and in one fell swoop, that's not a realistic goal. But what we can do is make sure that our priorities are public education. We can make sure that they are playing by the same rules as our public education schools, as our school districts, and they fall within our school district budgets, that they have to answer to those same rules and requirements. They have to answer to their communities. They have to answer to the parents, and they need to take care of every single school that's in there, every single child that's in their system, and not just be able to you have them in there, get that basic allotment for that attendance for that person in school, and then push them back into our public schools without the money following. We need to hold our charter schools accountable, but most importantly, we need to put more value and more priority on our public education system across the state before we continue to push charter schools. Because when our public schools are fully funded, when our teachers are paid what they should be paid, we start seeing innovation. We start seeing our schools take on more projects and try to advance in different areas. Because our schools haven't been fully funded in so long, we've seen a decrease in a lot of those job skills training that we used to have. There used to be shop and carpentry and home ec in almost every high school in our state, in our area. Now we're seeing that in only certain schools, or schools are having to partner with community colleges in order to get that done. And that's because of the funding, and that's because of the priority of the funding and where we're focusing those funds. And that's something we can change at the state level. It's something we can start to fight for and push for. But we have to work with everybody to get that done, and we need everyone's support in those fights. So thank you.
Thank you. Morgan, we're going to start with you, and then Sarah, 3 minutes again each. Healthcare costs are also rising for educators and retirees. What will you do to address the cost in TRS care so that educators and retirees can afford the care they need?
So as I mentioned in my introduction, when I talk about healthcare, it's not figurative. I have hands-on experience with it. And I've been able to sit down with retired teachers and talk to them about the healthcare benefits that are currently being offered through TRS care. And TRS care is something that makes sure and guarantees that our educators and our teachers have a plan when they retire. However, the costs of that plan keep increasing year after year exponentially. And our state pays about $75 per month for each person on that plan. And that allotment from the state has not gone up since 2002 when it was first put in place. And our healthcare costs have increased drastically since then. There are there's so many costs that affect our retired teachers and our educators today. And healthcare is something that we just accept as that's a cost. There's nothing I can do about it. But there are ways to affect that cost. There are things we can do. And with TRS, having as many lives and people in there, that gives them negotiating power to go to these other, to our insurance providers, to go to our PBMs and negotiate better costs. And we saw that a few years ago when they finally did take the PBM and the insurance providers to the table and start negotiating that. And they were decrease that shortfall that we had in 2018 by having those negotiations and having that control power. And something we need to continue to do and push to do. And we need to find out what other innovative ideas are there out there that we can incorporate into our health insurance plan to reduce our costs while increasing the benefits. It's something we were able to do in the private sector, and I believe that that's something we can do in the public sector. It's something that we need to push for. It's something we need to talk about, and we can't just accept these fees as that's all we have, and that's what we have to work with and have to deal with, because we're not seeing that here, and that's not something I'm seeing with our plan. It's not something we're seeing anywhere else, but it's something that's falling on the shoulders of our teachers and our educators, and we need to do more to help them and keep them healthy. Our healthcare costs are going to keep increasing unless we do something about it, and that's something that needs to be done at the state level. We need to take that responsibility and start making that our fight.
Sarah, same question. Healthcare costs are also rising for educators and retirees. What will they do to address the cost? What will you do to address the cost in TRS care so that educators and retirees can afford the care they need?
All of us in this room know somebody, some retired teacher or active teacher who has to choose between going and paying for their insulin or turning on their light bill. All of us know a teacher that decides just to go down to the Walgreens and get a bottle of Vicks because they don't want to pay for a doctor's visit because they can't afford it. And we remember the story a couple of years ago of Heather Holland, Texas teacher Heather Holland, 38 years old, who didn't feel well, went to the doctor, and they told her she had the flu. all right, well, I'm 38, pretty healthy. And I'm sure she thought the same thing. And they gave her a prescription, and she was going to have to pay $116 to get her medication. She couldn't afford it, so she didn't get it. 38-year-old Heather Holland did not survive that flu. She died, and she left a young family behind her. When you go to a state over, and that $116 medication would have cost her $5. I mean, these are the stories, and these are what we're hearing. And now in times of COVID, I mean, these stories are just exemplified. So what we see is we see teachers abandoning TRS care and saying, well, we can't afford it, it's not worth it, so we're just going to abandon it. It's too expensive, it's too high, and it's not covering anything. And it's hard to find doctors that accept the insurance. The way that TRS care is funded too is problematic. It's funded from contributions from the state, current retired teachers, and school districts, this is the important part, based on total salaries paid to actual teachers. All right? But as we know, there's no growth in salaries. So what's happening is that the health care for retirees has not changed. So what is the solution, right? Well, we fix the way that it's being funded. First of all, it needs to be funded on the actual cost of healthcare. And we're not rewriting the plan. I mean, we just look at the state next door that had that $116 medication for $5. They figured it out. It's not going to take, rewriting the book. There are plans there that are working, that are keeping people alive and keeping people healthy. Whatever the ledge does, it should not require current and retired teachers to increase their contributions.
I would like to say thank you to both of our candidates. Sarah, would you like to make a closing statement? You have 3 minutes.
Sure. Thank you guys for having us here. Actually, I saw Morgan earlier today at another event with retired teachers, and I said it there and I'll say it again. The fact that we are in this competitive runoff race and there are 2 women at the top of this thing is really exciting. Times are changing. I mean, here we are, and we will be the witness. We will be, we will be the history makers. We already did it with Aaron, so let's keep this streak going. I think that it's really a proud day here in Brownsville when we see the system changing, right? I appreciate you guys. Sometimes I reflect on my days as a teacher, and I remember my very first day walking into a classroom. I had my little outfit and I had my lesson plans and I knew everything was going to go exactly how I had planned that day. Yeah, you're laughing because you know, right? You know, and I didn't know, but now I know. Like I said, I was a music teacher, right? And I think back about one of the first things that we teach our kids at that young, ripe age of 5 or 6. And one of the first things that we teach them is perseverance. We teach them, if you fall, you keep on going. The first song that I taught my students 15 years ago was the Itsy Bitsy Spider, right? And we all know that song. The Itsy Bitsy Spider went up that water spout and he fell down. But he kept on going up that water spout, right? Out came the rain and dried up all the sun. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the itsy bitsy spider climbed up the spout again, right? So we teach perseverance, but we promise in that story that this little spider will see a sunny day. I mean, that's the end game. is, you get washed out by the rain, but you keep on climbing and you will see a sunny day. And that's all the teachers are asking for. And that's what we've been promised since this ripe little age. And we need to remind our leaders of their 6-year-old self that sang that song and then knew that that sunny day would come after all the fighting and all the grief. And I would be proud to be your next state senator, and I will fight so we can see that next day. I appreciate it.
Morgan, would you like to make a closing statement? You have 3 minutes.
So I just want to say again, thank you all for being here today. I know your time is precious, and as we discussed, you have a lot of work on y'all's plate. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you and answer your questions. And if you guys have any other questions, I'm always available. Please reach out and let me know. But I really appreciate this opportunity. And as we went through a lot of these topics and these issues, they are complicated problems and they do not have simple solutions. If there is an easy road that solves the problem, I'll be glad to take it. But when we have these complex problems, what we need to do is we need to work together and we need to fight for those solutions one step at a time. And we need to work with as many people as possible to make sure we find the solutions. Because when we're talking about public education, we're talking about our future of our community, the future of our families, the future of our kids and our next generations. And we need to make sure that that future is secure and safe. And that means funding our public schools. That means taking care of our teachers, our educators, and all of our auxiliary staff as well. We need to be there for y'all. We need to make sure that you understand that we respect and value as a community, as parent groups, and as a state government as well. And we need to honor the promises that we made to you when you guys became educators, that we'll take care of you during retirement. We will make sure that you have the supplies that you need to teach the kids and cover that learning gap. And we need to make sure that we reward you when you guys go above and beyond. Because during the pandemic, y'all really did, each and every one of you. And there were studies and lessons and different types of data that was looked at. And the Rio Grande Valley was seen to be one of the most pandemic resilient schools in the entire state. And the reason for that was because of our educators. Because our educators went out of their way to make sure that they understood the technology that they were being asked to use. They flipped on a dime and changed the way they taught. And they not only reached out to their students, but they reached out to the family, because y'all understand this community and understand that we are very family oriented. And if you had the parents buy-in, if you had the parents understand that technology and how it was going to work, you made sure that those kids were on a path to success. So I congratulate all of you for all the hard work you did. And I hope that you understand that we respect and that we want to continue to respect you and value and expand that, not just at the state level, but in our communities as well. There's a lot of work to be done, but I hope we can start taking those steps together. But one of the most important things that I hope you guys take away is that you need to vote. I hope I earn your vote, but regardless, you need to vote. Because one thing we want to make sure is that Austin and the state hears us. And the reason why our teachers are being targeted is because they hear that teachers don't vote. And we can change that, and we can change that statement if you go out and vote and get your colleagues to vote.
Thank you, candidates. Best AFT and educators across the valley are thankful that you are willing to discuss these issues tonight, and we look forward to working together to advocate for our school students and school staff. And a big thank you to our audience who are doing this great work, yes, hard work, every day in and outside of the classroom. We appreciate you for being here tonight. To those at home, this concludes our program for the evening. We'd like to thank everyone for attending our SD27 Public Education Town Hall. We strongly encourage you to check the chat for volunteer opportunities to support our work and become a member. Visit texasaft.org/membership. Thank you and good night. There's snacks in the